3, 2, 1. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Timothy here. We're going to double down on these spoilers today. I was out of town yesterday without internet access, so I did not get to record a video for yesterday's spoilers, but it is Tuesday. I'm sorry, it's Wednesday, and I'm going to go ahead and breeze through Tuesday and Wednesday spoilers together, so there's a lot to talk about. I appreciate it if you stick around, or if you just check out a couple of them with me, that'd be cool too. But the first card we're going to look at here is Heaven to Earth, which is a rare. It's X in green to cast it from your hand. It is an instant, which is nice, and it deals X damage to each creature with flying. Normally, you don't want to main deck this sort of ability, this hurricane type ability, or whatever it's called, but there are some decks where it's really, really good against them. Mainly like blue-white flyer decks or something along those lines, or token decks that can make a lot of spirits or something like that. I don't know how prevalent that's going to be in limited, but the other half with Aftermath is Earth, which is X and double red to deal X damage to each creature without flying. So cute little interaction here. Wipe out all the flyers, and then next turn wipe out all the creatures on the ground, right? Earth is significantly more important than Heaven, since most decks will be primarily ground-based decks, and that's generally just how things work out. But this sort of effect's pretty nice, right? The only problem is you have to find a way to get this into your graveyard, and if you're not milling or discarding, then you're probably green-red, so you have to cast Heaven, and Heaven's just not that good of a main deck card. If these were reversed, this would be fantastic, but they're not, so it's kind of awkward. If you can find another way to discard Earth and get it into your graveyard, maybe you're just actually a red deck, no green at all, but you have a lot of discard spells, then Earth is a nice little payoff for being able to discard some of your cards to the graveyard, and then you can flash it back later. I could see if I had something like Hezeret or Teneb or Neheb or whatever the heck the Minotaur's name is, in my deck, then I could see running this card despite not having green at all in my deck and just using it as a way to discard it and then Aftermath it from the graveyard. So neat little card there. I don't know that it's actually super strong. I don't know that I would first pick it in a draft, but pretty good. You'll also notice I'm not going to be clicking the cards today because my internet for some reason is being very wonky, so I don't want to spend forever going back and forth. But we're going to look at a cycle of cards here. Renewed Faith, the white cycling card that gains life when you cycle it, or gains 6 life when you cast it, is the white part of the cycle. So we've already seen that one, but that one was spoiled early because it was part of the story spotlight. The rest of the cycle is right here. So basically the way the cycle works is they're reminiscent of old cycling cards, where if you cycle them you get some sort of minor bonus instead of the full card, and you get to draw a card in its place, or if you can wait long enough to actually cast the card, you get the full effect of the card. So the blue one is Vizier of Tumbling Sands, 2 and a blue for a 1/3 uncommon human cleric. Tap to untap another target permanent, or you can cycle it for 1 and a blue, and whenever you cycle it, you untap target permanent. So if you manage to stick this thing, you can untap 1 permanent per turn. If you cycle it, you get to untap a permanent immediately and draw a new card. So a little bit of a strategic play there. Not the most insane effect in the world here. I think there was a card like this in Fate Reforged that just untaps something and you draw a card, and that's not fantastic, but this is a nice little creature to stick on the board. It is mana ramp in blue too, because you can untap one of your lands, which is pretty interesting. There are some really strong late game blue cards in this set, but I like this card. It's not inherently like super strong, but it can ambush an opponent with the untap ability. It has cycling, which seems relevant in blue. Blue has a lot of payoffs for discarding, and it's just a nice little creature to have around on the board. Gives something like pseudo vigilance too. Stir the Sands is the black one. 4 and double black, 6 mana for uncommon sorcery. Create 3 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. You can cycle it for 3 and a black, and when you do, you get a single black 2/2 zombie creature token. So again, spreading that damage out. We've already seen from a couple of the cards that zombies really want to be spread out. There's a lot of bonus for having a lot of different tokens on the battlefield all at the same time. White-black is very centered on zombies, and it's very possible to have a card like this in your deck just be good at 6 mana. You're essentially getting a 6/6 for 6, right? But spread out across 3 bodies. And I've already said this a couple times. Making tokens and spreading damage out is usually better usually better than just having a vanilla 6/6, because it means your opponent's targeted removal becomes much worse. Granted, there are downsides to that, but this is a solid card. I could see wanting to cycle this a lot. It's essentially, if you cycle it, you're playing a 4-mana 2/2 that draws a card, and that's a fine card, especially for black. Black doesn't get effects like that very often, or like cantrip and creatures. And you can do the cycling at instant speed, which means you can make a body at instant speed, which is pretty nice. But the card itself is a sorcery for 3 zombies, and if you're in a zombie deck that's able to spread out damage or pump a team, or maybe you have the zombie lord that we're going to see here in a little bit, then this card gets super, super strong. Moving on to the green one, Sheffet Monitor is 5 and a green for a 6/5 uncommon lizard. You can cycle it for 3 and a green. You notice the cycling costs are all kind of, well, no, never mind. When you cycle it, you may search your library for a basic land card or a desert card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Notice that doesn't say tapped. It does come in untapped, which is pretty nice. So you can either mana ramp with this for 4 mana, which isn't impressive, or you can go get a desert, which unless we see like a really bonkers desert, that still doesn't seem impressive to me either. Or if you can, manage to hold out till turn 6, you just get a pretty decent attacker here. 6/5 for 6 is nothing like super impressive or anything. It's just a big vanilla creature. This doesn't have trample or anything, so it's not as good as like the Hydra with Embalm that we saw. Not even close. But it does have a little bit of utility if you need to mana ramp, or if you need mana fixing. This is a really expensive way to do it, similar to like Wild Wanderer from Kaladesh. Even though if you cycle this, you're not leaving a body behind on board. So the cycling on this one's a little bit on the weaker side, but you need it. If you need it, you can use it. If not, you just hold out and cast this on turn 6. And then Deem Worthy is the red one, 4 and a red for an uncommon instant. Deal 7 damage to target creature. You can cycle it for 3 and a red, and if you do, you deal 2 damage to target creature. So pretty nice flexibility on this one. 4 mana to draw a card and deal 2 damage is okay. There are some things that's not going to hit, which will be a little bit disappointing. But the actual cost of casting this is not that much more expensive than the cycling cost. So around that turn where this is going to be relevant, you get to kind of determine whether or not there's something to kill, or whether or not you hold out another turn and just dome a bigger creature. And I really like this one because it lets you take care of a smaller creature for a reduced cost and then replace the card, or it has the option to take care of the bigger creature. I would be more excited with this card to actually cycle it and take a creature out, because then I'm getting an actual 2-for-1, whereas if I have to wait a turn and actually just deal 7 damage to something, I'm still probably happy because I took out a bigger creature, but I'm not replacing the card, so it's just a 1-for-1. So a little bit of flexibility there. I think this cycle is justified uncommons. I think the effects are strong enough, and the cycling is strong enough that they justify their spot as uncommon. The white one's the only one I don't like, surprisingly. I know a lot of people really like it, but I'm not a fan of it. Moving along, we got a lot to get through. Cryptic Serpent is 5 and double blue for a 6/5 uncommon serpent. It costs 1 less to cast for each instant or sorcery in your graveyard. Now, red-blue has a little bit of like an instant sorcery theme to it in this set. Not huge from what we've seen, just a little bit. And we'll see a gold card in a little bit that also kind of fits that archetype, so to speak. But this is similar to Gearseeker Serpent in Kaladesh. Not as strong because it doesn't have the activated unblockable ability, which just wins games. But this is a big beater for blue, right? And I think the idea here is that blue has a lot of control spells that you can cycle. And it's a nice way to turn this thing online and make it cheaper, is to cycle your instants and sorceries rather than just naturally cast them throughout the game, so that your hand is full, you can dig for this guy, and you can use this to try and be your finisher or something like that. Again, there's no sort of evasion on this card, so it's just a big dumb creature. But if you can get it out turn 5 or earlier, it's a little bit ahead of the curve for most things your opponent's going to be playing. And it's a big thing for blue, which blue often struggles closing out the game, so having a creature like this in your deck seems pretty nice. And then there's some dream situations where you can cast this for double blue, but that seems much less likely than Gearseeker Serpent. This is no Gearseeker Serpent by any means, but it is uncommon for a reason, because you can cast it cheaply. Moving on, we have Grim Strider, which just has fantastic art here. 4 and a black. I'm sorry, I definitely know how to read. 3 and a black for a 6/6 uncommon horror creature token. It gets -1/-1 for each card in your hand. Again, Black-Red's archetype here for the set is something along the lines of being hellbent or having very few cards in your hand to play with. Niheb fits into that category. Hazaret fits in that category. And then we have this thing, which definitely fits into the category as well. sooner you can empty your hand, the stronger this guy gets. And this could potentially be a 4-mana 6/6. A lot of times I think it'll come down as like a 4/4, maybe a 5/5 or 3/3 or something along those lines. And then the following turn, it can probably attack as a 6 if you play your cards right and you're able to empty your hand. This card really encourages you to play with a very low curve and just a lot of burn spells, a lot of spells that get you hellbent very quickly. For those of you who don't know, hellbent just means you have no cards in your hand. And yeah, this is just a big beater. But again, no evasion or anything. If you spend your entire first couple turns emptying your hand just for this to be your payoff and it gets removed, then you're in a very bad situation because now you're in top deck mode. But the body is big enough that it's a big enough payoff to do that too. Hopefully your opponent's not like token heavy deck and they can just block it turn after turn. But I kind of like the card. I don't think it's like super powerful or anything like that, even though it looks like it is. I just don't think that type of strategy really pays off very often, to just empty your hand and hope that the things you have on board are enough to do it. Or at least in limited. Sun-Scorched Desert. I didn't know Desert was a land subtype, but apparently the old card Desert is a subtype of land. But anyway, a common Desert here. When it enters the battlefield, you deal damage to target player, and it taps for colorless mana. So this is what Sheffet Monitor is referring to when it says you can go fetch up a Desert. This isn't good. The only reason I would ever play this is if there were some sort of payoff for having deserts in your deck, and this is not a payoff for deserts. Because this can also just go fetch a basic. Or if I was a monocolored deck or super heavy in one color and my other color considerations didn't really matter that much, then this could really just be a free damage in your deck. But 1 damage is not like impressive or anything like that. And I probably wouldn't run this most of the time, unless there's some sort of card that really pays you off for having deserts, which there might be. It seems really weird to bring the subtype desert here and just have one card that references it, but I don't know. Whatever. I could bring this in against Planeswalkers too, because it deals 1 damage to a Planeswalker, but I don't know. I don't think it's good. Plague Belcher is 2 and a black for a 5/4 rare zombie beast with menace. When it enters the battlefield, you put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature you control. And whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses a life. So, a couple cool things going on here. 3 mana 5/4 is huge, right? We've seen this with a couple of the green cards. Instead of having creatures that come in small and build up with 1/1 counters, you have creatures that have overcosted power toughness, or I'm sorry, undercosted for their power and toughness, but they spread around -1/-1 counters. Now the cool thing about this is that the counters do not have to go on this creature. They can go on a creature you already have, and this is a 3-drop, so it's very likely you have something like a 1 or 2. Imagine if you had played the Dissenter, this guy on turn 2, Doom Dissenter, and then you play Plague Zombie or whatever, Plague Belcher on turn 3, and you get to put the counters on that guy, kill him, get a zombie. It just seems fantastic, right? So there are a lot of cool things you can do here. This has menace too, so it's really hard to deal with. And then there's an extra little bonus of killing your other zombies to make your opponent lose life, which is pretty nice. If you can get a 2/2 zombie token on board by turn 2 and then put the counters on that, you get an extra little trigger here. This reminds me a lot of the Emerge mechanic from Eldritch Moon, where you would kill one of your own creatures off to make a creature a really powerful creature and just basically cast it for less and then get a huge payoff for it. This doesn't seem like a gigantic payoff, but it does seem like a really good card. 5/4 Menace on turn 3 is just a huge beater, and your opponent's going to have a lot of trouble dealing with that if you can stick the counters on another creature. Otherwise, if you have to put the counters on this thing itself, it's a 3/2 Menace, and that's just significantly less impressive, seeing how there's a common 3/2 Menace in the set. And that extra little ability is just kind of like gravy. It's not really something I'm actively looking for, but that life loss can add up if you are very heavy in zombies and have a lot of tokens going around. So this is a solid card in my opinion, but you need to have the curve to support it. If you don't have a lot of 1s and 2-drops in your deck, it gets a lot worse. Moving on, Lord of the Accursed is 2 and a black for a 2/3 uncommon zombie creature. Other zombies you control get +1/+1, and you can tap it and pay 1 and a black to give all of your zombies menace until end of turn. This card is fantastic for limited. This is like limited build around, first pickable uncommon by far, and then encourages you to just draft as many zombies as you can. It's very, very rare to get an effect like this especially for a creature type on an uncommon, and then also have some other bonus on it too. And this is just a 2/3 for 3, which is a solid card. It's not like this is a 1/1 or anything like that. Notice he doesn't get his own abilities, but these do stack in multiples. And given all your zombies, Menace is very relevant. If you have cards that make multiple zombie tokens at the same time, like, that's super powerful in my opinion. A lot of these zombies are pushed for standard play, and that makes them really strong for limited play too. This card is just all around a solid card, like very strong first pickable material if your rare is a little bit underwhelming. So he has my seal of approval. I happen to like zombies quite a bit, and I'm glad they're getting even more love in this set. Moving on to Dread Wanderer, another zombie. This is 1 black for a rare 2/1 zombie jackal. Enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 2 and a black to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield, but only at sorcery speed and only if you have 1 or fewer cards in your hand. Again, supporting that archetype of just not having a lot going on in your hand, right? And obviously, this is a really aggressive card. This is the type of card you play to empty your hand out anyway, since it's a 1-drop 2-power creature, which those are reasonably strong in limited, but I think they're overrated too, especially ones that come in tapped, because then if you need them as blockers late in the game, they don't get to do that, and you're always taking a turn off with this card, right? There's no giving it haste and attacking or anything like that. It is a recursive creature, so if you have a lot of these things that put -1/-1 counters on your own creatures, that's a great target for it because it's something you can get back later in the game. It's not as strong as something like Gravedigger. It can, or not Gravedigger, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The Gravecrawler, is that it? Yeah. We see this sort of creature a lot, and I think they're a little bit overrated for limited. But if you have any sort of payoff for having a recursive creature, maybe some sort of sacrifice outlet, or something that you need to just pile -1/-1 counters on, then this is a good target for it. But otherwise, I don't think this card is like first pick material. I don't think it's that strong, and I think the 1-mana 2/1 thing is like overrated and limited. They just fall off very quickly, and they end up trading. And I'm not in love with this card, but it does have some archetypal synergy going for it. Moving on, this is probably the most interesting card in the set to me. I really think it is. Nissa, Steward of Elements, is X, green, and blue. So X, first time we've seen X in a Planeswalker cost, and it comes in with loyalty equal to X, right? So if you pay 1 for X, she comes in with 1 loyalty. You can't pay 0, otherwise she dies right away. So it's not a 2-mana Planeswalker, but you get to determine how much loyalty she comes in with based on how much you pay for X. The +2 is Scry 2, very simple and clean. Notice that you could pay this on turn 3 by paying 1 for X and then plus her, and she's at 3 loyalty and just goes up and up from there. Scry 2 is a nice +2. It's not quite as good as drawing a card, but it does set up your turns pretty nicely and puts cards you don't want on the bottom of your deck. The 0 ability lets you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land or if it's a creature with mana cost equal to or less than her loyalty counters, you may put it onto the battlefield, which is really nice. If you're going to 0 right away, you really want to make sure that you're paying a lot for X, right? So this can be used really early to start setting up some scries, or really late to just get a lot of card advantage, or these 2 abilities work in conjunction pretty nicely. You can scry 2 and then put a card that you want to draw next turn on top of your deck, and then put the card that you want to flip with Nissa or reveal with Nissa underneath that, so that it's set up for the 0 ability. Lots of cool interaction there. And then the -6, untap up to 2 target lands you control. They become 5/5 elemental creatures with flying and haste until end of turn. They're still land. So it's really easy to build up to that -6, I think. So this card's going to be just bonkers. I think it is really strong. It has lots of advantage going on here. And even though the Scry 2 is not generating card advantage, it's setting you up for card advantage. And if you're scrying like lands to the bottom when you don't need them, that's effectively the same as drawing cards for the most part. Not exactly, but close to it. And then the -6 is pretty game winning. It's not a big like splashy emblem, but having 10 flying power in the air with haste is pretty strong. It is possible that you just pay X is 6 and you pay 8 mana for Nissa and you -6 right away, and then you dome your opponent for 10, but I don't see that happening too often. It's probably more likely you'll pay like 3 or something like that, and then scry her up to 2, scry her up to 7, and then -6 and try to win the game with that. But I really like this card. I think it's unique, and this is what I love to see out of Planeswalkers. Also, I hate Nissa just because she comes up so often recently, and all of her cards are so boring and so like Nissa that I really like the variation here with the blue and the X. I think this is what I really like to see out of Planeswalkers and design in general, is just pushing the boundaries of what you can do with a certain type of card, and this is really unique. I really like having the X cost here in a Planeswalker. I think it makes for a really exciting card. Now, I'm not going to click this in case my internet decides to crap out on me, but Rhonas, the Indomitable, or whatever it's called, is 2 and a green, and I'm going to see if I can remember this ability. It's a 5/5. It is a mythic god, obviously. It has Death Touch and Indestructible. Death Touch is really weird on an unkillable 5/5 creature. Like, it just doesn't seem relevant. But it cannot attack or block unless you control a creature with power 4 or more. So ferocious, essentially. Not that hard to pull off either. And then for 2 and a green, you can give another creature +2/+0 and trample until end of turn. It can't target itself with that ability. So if you don't have a creature with power 2 or more, you can make a creature with power, 4 or more. You can use the activated ability to get you there, so this can attack. This is super strong compared to some of the other gods. This one is not that hard to pull off at all, and it has huge power and toughness. Just 5/5 for 3. Just swinging in there, right? It's really not that hard to play this on turn 3 and then follow up with a 4-power creature, or, you know, like a really weak creature and then pump something or something along those lines. This thing should be attacking and blocking pretty easily, I think. And the activated ability is just nice too. It lets you push your other creatures in there. So really, really hard to beat this card when it comes to limited. We'll very likely see standard play. And as one person in one of the comments on one of these sites pointed out, you can hit this with Collected Company, which is pretty sweet too. So not much else to say other than it's a very good card. Definitely, I think between this and Oketra, those are probably the best 2 gods. We will see the Black God here in just a second, but I don't think it's anywhere close. Anointed Procession. I am trying to speed through these quickly so we can get through everything in a reasonable time. Anointed Procession is 3 and a white for a rare enchantment. If an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice that many of those tokens instead, and this is the 3rd Story Spotlight card. This is an interesting effect for white. Normally you get this in green. We saw this with there was a card in Shadows over Innistrad. I can't remember the name of it. 2nd season, that's it. That could double the tokens you already had, and then obviously there's like double in season and primal, whatever it's called. Cards that double your tokens are usually green. This one doubles your tokens in white. It's a little bit of a bust when it comes to limited, I think. Maybe not. I have no idea how to evaluate this card. It's just having this as my rare isn't exciting to me, but black-white is this zombie deck, and there are a lot of tokens running around when it comes to things like Embalm and just the black zombie tokens in general, that this seems pretty nice. Now, where this seems awesome is with Embalm, right? Because you're essentially getting 2 creatures per Embalm trigger. You get an additional creature every time you embalm something from the graveyard, and if that's a significant creature, you're getting a significant bonus off of this card. But this is also the type of build around rare where you're tapping 4 mana and you're probably not doing anything the turn you play this, and you're taking a whole turn off, so you really have to have a plan. But as I've already mentioned, the white-black zombie deck is kind of grindy, and Embalm cards really lend themselves to a grindy match anyway. So, I don't know, there might be time to play this card and just reap the benefits. And if you have a deck that can just embalm like crazy and makes tons and tons of tokens, then I would say you would probably play this card. But it's probably not something I'm first picking. Or if I do, I want to make sure I take every single embalm creature I see just as a payoff there. Excuse me, sorry, I got something stuck in my throat here. Moving on, Harsh Mentor is 1 in a red for a 2/2 rare human cleric. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, activate. Oh, if it isn't a mana ability, that's pretty important. Harsh Mentor deals 2 damage to that player. So your opponent can't use lands for anything other than mana. They can't use activated abilities of creatures. They can't tap artifacts for things other than mana without taking just a bunch of damage. And this is just a 2 mana 2/2, so you're playing this card anyway. Very powerful, easy to play around because your opponent just doesn't have to activate those abilities, but at some point this could be a lock piece to stop your opponent from doing anything significant, right? This was definitely made for standard play, possibly even modern play. You know, it just makes crew and vehicles damage you. It makes activating like pretty much anything damage you. You know, Kraken Evolving Wilds damages you. Like, just a lot of stuff happens. Kraken a Clue token damages you. Just a lot of really annoying interactions that this card has when you are facing against it. In Limited, a little bit less so, but still something that people might forget about, something that they have to deal with if they want to be able to take full advantage of the cards that they have, especially if they have activated abilities. And altogether, just a really solid card. Like I said, I don't think this thing is going to be like the bee's knees in Limited. I think it was designed with Constructed in mind, and it definitely shows. But you would still play this in Limited, despite it being just a 2-mana 2/2 when it's not working. So possibly not quite deserving of its rare status when it comes to Limited play. But it depends on what those activated abilities are, right? Moving on, Protection of the Hakma is 4 and a white. For an uncommon enchantment, if a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. Not a terrible card, not a good card, very pricey. There was a card like this called Orbs of Warding in M15, and that was like a rare, and nobody ever picked it. It is nice that these stack, I guess. If you can just put a bunch of these on the battlefield, then whatever. If your opponent's playing burn spells, then this reduces it. But most of the time, this just functions as taking a damage off of whatever your opponent deals to you. It seems like, if you guys remember, there was a card in Battle for Zendikar called Dampening Pulse. It was an enchantment that gave all of your opponent's creatures -1/-0, and sometimes it was good. This is basically just a pumped-up version of that. It doesn't make your opponent's creatures weaker, but it makes them deal less damage, and I didn't really like Dampening Pulse very much, even though it was fine, and I don't think I'm going to like this either. I can see myself almost never playing this card. I think it's a little bit on the weak end, but if your opponent has a lot of really small creatures and they're trying to spread out damage like all over the place instead of just really big creatures, then sure, board this in, but as is, I'm going to stay away from it. And finally, our black god Bontu the Glorified is 2 and a black for a 4/6 mythic god with menace and indestructible, not lifelink sadly. Can't attack or block unless a creature died under your control this turn. That is super specific. Obviously the activated ability is there to help us. 1 and a black, sacrifice another creature, scry 1, each opponent loses a life and you gain 1 life. I think this god is really, really weird and hard to pull off, because by the time creatures normally die, you're already after combat, right? So you need to be killing your own creatures before combat, which is not something I usually recommend, since it gives you less attackers and blockers. Obviously, you can sack your own creatures and then turn this on, and if you're sacking creatures that you have no problem getting rid of, like the Dissenter or tokens or something along those lines, then sure, being able to turn this into a 4-power menace is really strong. But you need to have a lot of expendable creatures to be able to do that turn after turn after turn. It's also really weird, because in order to block with this, you have to kill one of your own creatures before combat too, which is not something you normally want to do, right? The payoff is definitely here as a 4-power, 6 toughness, menace, indestructible creature. Like, I have no idea why the toughness on these creatures are so high. Probably just to not die to X spells, -X spells, but I don't know. This one is so specific. This is probably the worst god of them all as far as the attack and block condition goes. Kefnet's also really, really hard to pull off, I think, but I don't know. If you can make use of this activated ability and you want some sort of repeatable sacrifice, scry, drain life engine in your deck, then sure, play Bontu. But otherwise, this one requires a lot of things to be going right in order for it to ever be a relevant creature in combat. And I think it's going to be hard to pull this one off, even though it looks like it's super strong. I think the most power is in that activated ability, not in the god itself. So I don't know what to think of this one. It's a little underwhelming as the last god. Definitely not up there with Kefnet and, or not Kefnet, but Oketra and Rhonas. Definitely not even close. Let's see. I might have to click one here. Let me see if I can remember what this Sphinx does. No, I can't. Okay, let's click it and see if we can get to it. Yeah. All right, cool. So we have Glyph Keeper, 3 double blue. We're in Thursdays or Wednesday spoilers, by the way. So there might be a couple new ones. Glyph Keeper is 3 and double blue for a flying Sphinx, a 5/3. It's rare. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time in a turn, counter that spell or ability. Pretty nice. That includes your own spells or abilities, just so you know. And then you can embalm this. Don't have the token up yet, but Zombie Sphinx, right? Awesome. Again, they just took a bunch of creature types and they're like, what would be really cool with Zombie? Oh, Hydra, Sphinx, Angel? Sure. The embalm cost is 7 mana, 5 and double blue. But that's a nice little payoff. I think I mentioned this last time with the other Cyclone Sphinx guy, but that's just a lot of power in flying, a lot of flying power for the mana cost. 5 mana for a 5 power flyer and a really hard to kill creature. Granted, this isn't quite hexproof, but your opponent's going to have to use 2 removal spells on this, and that's just not helping very much. There are ways around that. For instance, if you have something like the guy that says tap to untap target permanent, you can use that as a way to put the shield down. That ability will be negated, and then that leaves the Sphinx open for removal, but your opponent has to have something like that going in order to take care of this, or they just have to have 3 power flyers. And then if they deal with it, they use 2 removal spells to kill it. A couple turns later, you embalm it, and boom, baby, he's back, and just as hard to kill the second time. I'm excited to see what the token looks like, but this is probably just a bomb. Blue always gets these huge flying bomb creatures, and this seems really tough to deal with. The type of card that your opponent just plays on turn 5, and you groan and look at your hand, and you're like, I had the perfect removal spell for this, and now I have to find another way to get around it. Moving right along, we have Sweltering Suns. 1 and double red for a rare sorcery. Deals 3 damage to each creature, and you can cycle it for 3 mana. So pretty steep cycling cost. 3 is a lot to be cycling, but this is a sweeper. It is a rare. I'm not a big fan of like just cards like this that kill my own creatures at rare, but I don't know. It's cheap, right? And we see this sort of effect a lot. It's also really weird that this is in a set where there's also that Heaven and Earth card, or Heaven to Earth. So there's like an extra sweeper in the set, and they're both rare, but I don't know. This is strong enough that you'll play it most of the time, and you'll probably be happy to have it if you're red, and then your opponent plays a 4 toughness creature, and you're like, nah. Or if your opponent's just not playing a deck that this is going to be effective against, you can always cycle it. It's just like a card called Starstorm, I believe, even though I think that was X instead of 1. But I don't know. It's flexible. Cycling, again, makes for flexibility. You either need a sweeper and you're happy with it, or you don't need a sweeper and you cycle it. I'm usually an advocate of playing cards like this in your main deck anyway, so I'd be happy to have Cycle in there. There are some times that card's just not going to do it for you, and you wish you'd drawn something else, but I'm not excited about the 3 mana Cycling either. Wayward Servant is our white-black gold card, confirming that black-white is meant for zombies. 2/2 for an uncommon zombie. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. I really like this card. It's not like killing it on the power toughness scale or anything like that. It is just a 2/2 zombie, and it is a little bit hard to cast on turn 2 if you're black-white. You need to have a pretty decent opening hand to make this thing pan out on turn 2. But the sooner you get it down, the better, because if you're playing this, you're probably very heavy in zombies, and black-white just has a lot of support for that. Lots of cards we've seen that make multiple zombies at the same time, or zombies that can recur themselves from the graveyard, or if you're just playing Embalm, you get those zombie tokens back from the graveyard, and so on and so forth. So this can gain, if this ever gains like 2 to 3 life over the course of a game, it's already done its job, and even 1 little bit of life would be nice. And they stack in multiples very, very nicely, so if you can get a bunch of these, that seems cool too. But just a solid little gold card. Again, the gold cards are kind of here to tell us what the archetypes are supposed to be doing, and if it wasn't obvious by now, then, you know, black-white, you're supposed to be playing zombies and embalm cards and stuff like that. Enigma Drake. I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to stop clicking. Enigma Drake is 1 blue and a red for an X4 or a star 4. It is an uncommon Drake creature with flying. Its power is equal to the number of instants or sorceries in your graveyard. So again, blue-red seems like it's geared towards having instants and sorceries in your graveyard. This is the third, maybe fourth blue card that we've seen that cares about instants and sorceries in your graveyard, with the Serpent being one of them, and the Scribe that can sack itself to get a card back being another one. This card goes from really mediocre to really powerful depending on the deck, right? Obviously, the higher your instant sorcery count is, the stronger this card is. There was a card like this in Theros, Spellheart Chimera, I believe, that was basically the same, but it was a star 3, same cost, same effect, but it had Trample as well. Trample's not super relevant on flyers most of the time, but I like this card. If you can ever get this out to like 2 power, it's an on-curve flyer, and if you ever get this above 2 power, it's just absolutely insane for 3 mana. So very strong card, not one that I'd be happy to pick up very early, not even one I would be happy to splash, just the type of card that once I know I'm blue-red, I'm actively looking for this, but I don't take this until I know I'm blue-red, right? It's not an incentive to play blue-red, it's more of a payoff for playing blue-red. Complete opposite here. This card is absolutely insane. Samut, I think. I don't know. Samut. Voice of Dissent is 3 red and a green for a 3/4 mythic legendary human warrior with flash, double strike, vigilance, haste. Other creatures you control have haste. Untap another creature for a white and tap this. This thing is insane. First off, for commander purposes, this is Naya color because it has a white activation cost. Not going to talk about that too much because we're not a commander channel very much. But for limited, this is just a double color card. You're splashing this all day, right? If you're red-white, you're like, okay, let me put some green sources in my deck. And then this is super powerful. Let's just take it one step at a time. 3/4 flash for 5 mana is not amazing, but something you would probably play, right? 3/4 flash with double strike is just insane because that's going to ambush your opponent's creature, and 4 toughness on a double striker means it's never going to die. Vigilance means this thing gets to attack and block every single turn with double strike. Haste means a lot of things. This can just come down on your turn. You don't even have to flash it. It can come down on your turn and just win the game or force some sort of ridiculous combat to happen. Or because of flash and haste, you can flash this on your opponent's turn and use the activated ability right away to untap another creature and really get your opponent. And then on top of that, it gives all of your other creatures haste too, which is just insanely powerful. This card is bomb. And like you could delete that last ability and it would still be good. This is really interesting. You hear people talk about this a lot when they're reviewing mythics. Like, how many abilities could you take away from this card and still have it be an insane creature? If it didn't have that other creatures have haste thing, if it didn't have the activated ability, it would still be very powerful. Maybe not a mythic, but a 3/4 flash, double strike, vigilance, haste is a very powerful card. And then having just 2 more abilities tapped onto that seems insane. This card is crazy good. First pick it every time. Draft red-green. Put some white in there if you can, and just be super happy about it. Like, absolutely insane card. Just very powerful. Like, I don't know what else to say, right? Anyway, let's look at not powerful cards. By Force is X and red for an uncommon sorcery. Destroy X target artifacts. This is Story Spotlight number 4, by the way, and that is Chandra helping out poor little Samut here, who seems to be having a problem. Also, well, look, Gideon's back here. Gideon just shows up a lot. Anyway, By Force, this is not designed with limited in play. In fact, we haven't even really seen any artifacts that you would be clamoring to like bring in artifact removal against anyway. Maybe a couple, but nothing that's like so insane that you want an X spell to destroy multiple artifacts. This is 2 mana, destroy an artifact at sorcery speed. It's a little annoying this is uncommon. It has to be because it has the ability to destroy multiple things, but this isn't Kaladesh, right? You're not going to be killing a bunch of things. You're not going to main deck this card. Heck, I wouldn't even be really happy to bring this in out of the sideboard for a single target. I would rather have the green card that cycles, but this was made for constructed, and because of that, it's really annoying that this is an uncommon, because this is just an uncommon that you're never taken early. This will wheel very often. I can't see ever wanting this effect in the deck unless there are just tons of great artifacts, and we haven't seen that many at all, so skip on this card. Purely a sideboard card. Do not ever main deck it. and then play it in Standard and let people determine. I bet if I click this card, I haven't, but I bet if I clicked it, the whole comment section is just an argument about whether this or Release the Gremlins is a better card. That's just my guess. BT Dubs, Release the Gremlins is a better card. Anyway, Vizier of Many Faces is 2 and double blue for a 0/0 rare Shapeshifter Cleric. If I stopped there and covered up the text and asked you what this card did, you'd probably guess it right. But it's a clone, right? You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. The exception here is that it has Embalm for 3 and double blue, so 5 mana to bring it back from the graveyard. But if you embalm it, the token is still white. It's still in a zombie in addition to its other types. So it doesn't copy the color of whatever creature it's copying when it comes into play, and it has no mana cost, so it doesn't copy the mana cost when you embalm it. It does when you cast it for the first time. So really interesting. Clones are usually really good in limited, and we are going to click this so that I can show you guys the token. Pretty sweet. Zombie Shapeshifter Cleric. Awesome, right? This is a really cool card, and I think it's really strong too. Clones, like I just said, are very good in limited because they always make sure you have the best creature on board, or at least tied for the best creature on board. Or if you need to use them for a utility, you have something with a good enter the battlefield trigger, you can just use it for that too. And then putting Embalm on that is also very nice because it gives you a second crack at it. Similar to the Angel of Sanctions, these are good one-time effects that you would play almost all the time anyway, and then Embalm gives you extra mileage out of that card. So Embalm on an effect like this almost makes it a bomb. An Embalm, haha. Because you're already playing this card. A 4-mana clone is a card that we've seen tons of times in limited, and it's always good. Clones are almost always good. I fail to see one that's just absolutely terrible. Mercurial Pretender, are you down here? No. Like, look at these. These are all good cards. But anyway, I think this card is cool. I think that the fact that you can embalm this and bring it back again and clone again the best creature on board, so your opponent has to deal with it twice, is really nice. And that leaves me with saying that blue just has a lot of really good rares in this set, right? Draketown seems like something that you can really build around. There are 2 separate Sphinxes that are just impossible to beat flyers, and then you have this thing too, which I can say it 1,000 times. Clones are just good in limited, and a clone that you get a second crack at seems sweet too. But I think I just literally repeated the same phrase I said the first time. Anyway, that takes care of everything from yesterday and today. I know this video is probably going to be super long, but I appreciate you hanging out. And I would love to hear you guys' opinions about the cards and anything else you guys have to say. Remember to hit the little like button somewhere down there and subscribe if you feel like it for more of these videos, although they're not normally as long as this one. But anyway, thanks again for watching. We'll be back. We've got about 2 to 3 more days of spoiler videos till we wrap up and see the whole set, and I can start doing my review of the set. And as always, my name's Timothy, and I will see you all next time.